Welcome to Read Between the Lines, a book podcast. I am your host, Molly Southgate. Today I'm interviewing...
Daisy Bateman.
Hey Daisy, how are you doing today?
I'm doing very well, thanks. How are you?
I'm doing great. So, can you tell me about your books?
Sure. Well, I write cozy mysteries, or so far I've published one cozy mystery. It's set in a artisan market in a small town on the Northern California coast. And the protagonist owns the marketplace, and she has to investigate when one of her tenants is murdered.
That sounds so cool. So, can you talk a little bit about the differences between writing cozy mysteries and other types of mysteries?
Sure. Well, cozy, it's a maybe more tightly defined subgenre than a lot of the other ones. It's almost always a amateur sleuth, so the main character, it can't be a police detective or a private eye or anyone whose job it is to investigate things. There is, of course, no swearing, no on-page sex or violence, or minimal violence, no on-page sex, and generally kind of an upbeat tone. That and I mean, all of these things can exist in other mysteries, but when you sort of combine it into the one thing, is when you have what would canonically be considered a cozy. Oh, and they're generally set in small towns, though that's not universal.
That is so cool. So can you tell me a little bit about, writing cozies, and, can you share any tips about that?
I mean, definitely the first thing is to enjoy reading them. That's so you sort of end up with an instinct of what to write when you read a lot of things. And really think about the things you like. I like the coast. I like food, particularly, and I really like discovering neat artisan makers. So that was kind of what drove me to come up with this particular setting and theme. It has to. The enthusiasm really needs to come through when you're writing about something, I think.
I was actually just about to ask you how you decided on the setting for this book and choosing it to be about these artisans and creating this market.
I noticed this type of market popping up a lot all over the place. The sort of prototypical one for me is the Ferry Building Farmers Market in San Francisco. Well, not just farmers market, but marketplace in San Francisco, where they have all of these different cool businesses in it. And I was noticing other ones, and I just thought, well, that would be a really neat setting, because you've got all these different people. You could talk about all these things like cheese making and pickles and making cured meats and stuff. And you have this kind of built-in community of interesting people to have in your books. So that was what drove me to choose that.
And also from reading some blurbs and stuff on your website, apparently it helped with finding out the murder weapons a bit, right?
Yes, I do. I do like a creative murder weapon. So that the jar of pickles and a cheese wire is probably not you wouldn't get that if it was set in an office building.
Yes. Yeah. So you mentioned you like to read cozy mysteries. Can you share with me a few of your top ones?
Sure. I mean, my favorite, and who I think is not nearly read as much as she should be anymore, is Charlotte McLeod. She wrote mostly in the late 60s through early 80s. Then they were sort of considered screwball cozies because they were kind of really a lot of very over the top nutty characters and very funny. And that was the first cozy mysteries that I ever read, and I still really love them. And then lots of course, modern writers. Donna Andrews is probably one of her clearest sort of descendants with her very funny cozies. And Katrina McPherson's books are little edgier than most cozies, but humor is the thing that really draws me. They're all very funny cozies are really my favorite thing.
Do you like writing funny cozies as much as you like reading them and infusing those quirkier elements into your characters?
I do. I try, and sometimes I have to dial it back because sometimes things are only funny to me. So, but I do try to make my books funny for everybody.
Believe me, I do that all the time. Just the other day, like, I go, oh, I started to make a joke and then went, oh, wait, that is only funny to me. Can you share any specific, like, flubs and stuff that you've had before where you're like, oh, wait, that makes no sense to other people?
Yeah, well, there isn't really. Let's see. I think I took most of them out. The one thing that I'm kind of pleased in there, and it's not really only funny to me as it is a reference that most readers of the book aren't going to get. But I'm a big Mystery Science Theater fan, and I snuck in a line, and so far nobody has commented on it. So I don't know if anybody's picked it up yet, but there isn't a big overlap between the Misty and Cozy Reader.
Would you share what line?
I kind of don't want to. I kind of want if anybody, because I want to see if anybody finds it. I'll say this: it's a very famous riff line. Anybody who's it's no stopper. She stole Mike's keyboard. Let's just say that. Which there's a joke that's not going to be funny to anybody but me.
Oh, all right. Well, I will definitely read your book, and I will make sure to write you if I find that. Because
okay, yes, you'll be the first one if you do. I should.
Oh, yeah. So you work in biotech, right?
I do.
So how has that influenced your writing, if at all?
Well, I try not to have it influence too much. I actually, the one time I did try to write something set in a scientific setting, I realized I was too involved in making everything super accurate, and it turned out really boring. So I think, if anything, it's just being out, the people. I don't put my coworkers in books or anything, but just the interactions you have and the living in the world sort of influences, gives you ideas and makes you think about how people are and how you can write about them.
So talking about like how the people are and stuff, you said that something that you really love in cozies is when the characters are kind of quirkier, and that's kind of a hallmark of most genres, like most books. Yeah. They have to have interesting characters, and also especially a lot of cozies. Mm-hmm. How do you go about creating characters but not making sure they're not too overblown?
Well, I generally I tend to start kind of big. And then in revisions, I'll wind up as I'll give people some fairly outrageous characteristics when I'm first creating the character, and then as I get to know them, as I write more about them, I sort of wind it back and make it more what would be a real person who would be, this super interested in frogs. No, like what is that's just coming up with a random sort of extreme characteristic, and how do you ground that in a character that isn't just a cartoon?
Okay, yeah. So, do you plot out who's going to be the killer at the beginning of the book, and like how do you make your characters go on this wild goose chase throughout the whole story to find out who it is?
I generally have an idea who's going to be the killer at the beginning of the book, or the sort of the general shape of the plot. And then, actually, that is probably one of the biggest challenges in cozy writing, because obviously, in the real world, people whose job it isn't their job to investigate murders don't do it. It would be an incredibly stupid thing to do. So you really need. You need to come up with a motivation. In this book, it's my main character is suspected and her business is under threat. So she has to figure out who the real killer is so that she can save herself and her business.
What are some things like about making it an amateur sleuth? Like I feel like this way, at least, that it almost makes it feel more familiar. Do you find that?
Yeah, I think so, and more relatable because most of us don't have the experience of being a police officer or a private investigator, so we can sort of imagine if we were going to solve a mystery, this would be how we would do it, and I think that's part of the appeal, even if it's not terribly realistic.
Oh yeah, I fully agree with that. So, do you ever have to be in like a specific environment or headspace to write?
I try not to limit myself that way because it's hard to get writing time. My favorite, unfortunately, I can't do it right now, but my favorite writing place was I used to commute on the ferry across the bay to my job, and that's a great writing time because you're just sitting there on the boat, and the Wi-Fi is terrible, so it's harder to distract yourself. But yeah, no, in general, I just try to say, here I am. I'm here right now. I'm going to try to write because otherwise I just wouldn't get it done.
So you mentioned how bad the Wi-Fi was there. Were you able to write on the computer, or did you usually write by hand?
Oh, yeah, I write on the computer, but obviously just not being able to get on the Wi-Fi means I can't check my email and doom scroll on Twitter but I can write offline.
Okay, yes, I am all too familiar with the infinite scrolling, and I'm sure a lot of writers are.
Yep.
Oh yeah. So how do you outline out your books?
Very roughly. I'll start with a synopsis, and sort of as I'm going, I will write down single line things of scenes that need to happen coming up. But I don't have a really formal outline that I do. I might be better if I did, but yeah, it's kind of a rolling outline, I guess you could say.
Do you feel like when you're doing that, it almost do you feel like it gives you a little bit more freedom in your writing?
Could be. I think partly it's just that I'm really lazy, and making a whole outline seems like work.
Oh, it is a little bit like writing 2 books.
Yeah. No, I have nothing but admiration for people who can do the really thorough outline and then generally right where I'm somewhere in the middle and feeling very stuck. I definitely wish I was one of them.
When you're writing, especially since you don't have an outline too, do you almost feel like you're getting pulled in different directions by your characters?
Sometimes, or I've had an idea and I start to follow it and I realize I followed that idea into a place that really the book didn't need to go, which is, you can sometimes make interesting discoveries, but you can also spend a lot of time in places that aren't going to be in the final product. But, good and bad.
Oh, yeah. One time I ended a book at chapter 3 when I was much younger, and I was like, oh no, I can't do that. I'm not supposed to make characters turn evil randomly and finish and kill everyone. That's not a good strategy. Do you have any things like that specifically where you're like, you looked back at your writing from when you were younger and you're like, oh my gosh, what was I doing?
I try very hard not to look back too much at my early writing. It was, yes, absolutely. Let's just leave it at that.
Okay. So, when did you start writing?
I started writing seriously when I was in college. That was when I wrote my first, and I did write that one. I did write longhand I had a big binder full of paper, and I would sit out on the lawn in front of my dorm and write on that book. So that was, I'd always loved books and reading, and always thought I would like to be a writer. But that was the first book I wrote.
That is so cool. I always love hearing about people's first books. It's so exciting. What was that one about?
That one was about, this is speaking of not wanting to go back to things that one wrote as when younger. It was a murder mystery, and it was set among flower fairies. So the fairies that represented different flowers, and they had this whole complicated society, and a murder happened, and it was an ambitious first book, let's say.
That is ambitious. No judgment, though. I'd probably end up reading that book for sure. But,
not that one. It was terrible, but somebody could probably write a good version of it.
So have you always liked doing the mystery type things?
Yeah, I think it really is my favorite genre. I've been reading ever since I was a kid. I've read other things as well, but it's when I'm thinking, well, what do I want to read? It's usually the first thing I think of is I'd like to read a mystery. Not really sure why. It's just the thing that appeals to me.
I understand that. Yeah, recently I've started discovering like a love for for mysteries and like for thrillers and stuff like that. In the future, do you think that you'll still write cozy mysteries, or do you think that you'll open it up to other genres?
I think I'll probably. I mean, I will definitely keep writing cozy mysteries. But I'd also like to write some other things. Probably, I will mostly stay. I'd imagine I'll stay mostly in the mystery genre for the foreseeable future. But I'd really like to do a historical and maybe even try my hand at a thriller.
Historicals are so great too.
No, I've been really enjoying reading some lately, and it's the amount of the research is definitely a challenge, but it's,
oh, what?
I was just going to say it's fun to immerse yourself in that in another time.
Yes, for that one, that's one that you would probably need an outline for. I've always been a little bit daunted by that genre because there's so much involved.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
So, can you tell me a little bit about subgenres? Because I know there's mysteries, but then off of that there's cozy mysteries, but then there's like romance is like sometimes there's like parts of romance that are off in different directions and.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's interesting how things break down. Like if there's a lot of romance novels that are, I mean, romantic suspense is its own entire genre, a subgenre, but that's generally considered a subgenre of romance, even though you could easily consider it a subgenre of thrillers or of mystery as well. It is interesting how they all break down. That cozies are, I mean, even within cozies, there's book cozies and there's food cozies, and I guess we just really love categories.
Yes. Yeah. So, what do you love about writing?
I really love being able to create these characters and have them kind of come to life for me and have them come to life for other people. That's the most exciting part about it for me. And just I've always got all these stories in my head and I just want to tell them. So.
Yeah, I definitely understand that. And like, do you ever feel like when you're a writer, like how you're right, you do have all of these stories like just inside of you, and like you just can't wait to get them out.
You just want to see them live, really.
Yes. That is excellently put. Do you have any that you can share that are some others that you would like to get out of your mind?
The problem is that they don't sound it's, whenever I try to explain an idea, it never sounds very good. So I like to keep my ideas kind of under wraps until I can make them into a book, and then they sort of only make sense as books. I guess if that's a as good of a non-answer as I can give.
Oh no, yeah, that does make sense because like. Especially when it's something that you've created, at least from what I've found, is that, like, it can be so hard to explain.
Mm-hmm, definitely.
Okay, now on to the impossible questions list, and if you cannot answer them, please let me know.
Okay.
But do you have an all-time favorite book? And this can be one that you've written, too. You can include yours.
That is... In terms of book that I have loved for longer than any other, I'd have to go with the Mixed Up Files of Mrs. Basil Frankweiler.
I love that one.
Every time a friend has a kid, I give them a copy. I'd be like, I know that your child is an infant now, but you'll need to own this for later. Mm-hmm. I just there's something about books you read when you were really young that make so much more of an impression. And also, it's just a really good book. I reread it as an adult, and still enjoy it.
Oh yeah, that one is so excellent. Can you talk a little bit more about like how books that you read when you were younger can leave an impression?
I think because it's looking back at something I realized I feel like I experienced them more intensely, and maybe it's what I'm talking about, wanting these stories to live. I really felt like when I was reading as a kid or being read to, that I really felt like I was in the books and I was experiencing the books in a way that I don't really, I mean, I still enjoy reading. I still see myself there on the Jurassic Park Island or in the hotel where the murders are happening or whatever. But it's nowhere. It's not quite as intense as when I was little, and I think that really left a bigger impression.
Did you like to read a lot when you were a kid?
Oh yeah, yes. I was always a big reader. Whole piles of books and going to the used bookstore to get more.
Oh, that's amazing. I always love hearing about, like, when people were kids, like, what they read too. It's so exciting because, like, it just makes my heart so happy to know that kids do read a lot. And I am a kid that reads, but still.
Yeah, no, and it was actually that you're talking about things that I'd like to write. I would one day I would really like to write something middle grade, because like I was saying, that was one of my favorite ages to read, and I'd love to be able to recreate that for other kids, but never hit on just the right idea. But that's sort of a long term dream idea to write a really fun middle grade book.
Oh, I love those types of books too. So you were saying you've never like quite hit on the right idea and that you've read a lot of these. Can you talk a little bit about like what can make the right middle grade book? Because it's a hard balance to get at something that kids would be interested in, but like don't dumb it down. And can you talk about that?
No, I mean, if I knew, I would probably. It's probably the ideas that I have are maybe what I need to do is just sit down as an adult and read a bunch of middle grade books, because the ideas that I have all have to do with, adult things, not adult as in inappropriate content, but just, the things that are important to you as an adult, which is different sort of than what is engaging when you're that age, like 9, 10 years old. And I think I just have had trouble putting myself in that headspace and thinking, what is the story for that person who is, not me as I am now, but me as I was then, or other kids who would be like me. So yeah, if anybody answers that question for you well, let me know, because I really want to hear about it.
I will. Yeah, and if anybody has answers to this question, you can email the show. We'll give the email at the end of the episode. But if anybody does have answers, please let us know. We need to help Daisy.
Yes. Help me figure this out so I can do what I want to do.
Yes, we can do it.
Okay.
Okay, so you said that we've been talking about like what you read as a kid and stuff. Can you talk about like individual books that like really struck a chord with you when you were young?
Well, I mentioned the Mixed Up Files is definitely a big one. The Cricket in Times Square was another. Obviously, these are all books from a while ago, because it's been a little while since I was a kid. But and then I did love pretty much everything Louisa May Alcott wrote. I read through all of her things, Little Women, and of course now I can't think of all the titles, but and The Secret Garden was also a favorite back then. Yeah. And then I wasn't just reading the classics. I also read every Babysitter's Club for at least, must have been 4 or 5 years that I was reading those. And I think I read all of the entire Black Stallion series, because I was a very horsey kid. Mm-hmm. And all the Wizard of Oz books. Yeah, I did read a lot.
Yeah. As did I, especially when I was young. Like right now, a lot. But when I was younger too, it's like there's something about reading when you're a kid. I don't know how to describe it right, but like kind of what you said earlier. Like the worlds feel even more real.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. The barrier between what you're reading and what you're experiencing, I think, is maybe thinner then.
Yes, definitely. So, do you have an all-time favorite book character? Once again, this can be one thing you've created. And you can give me a top 3 if you can't choose.
Well, I'm thinking, quite fond of Mrs. Paulifax from the Dorothy Gilman books. She's a elderly woman who turns spy for the CIA. She's a pretty great character. I'm going to throw in a character I did write, though whose book sadly was never published. He goes by the name of Cherry Bomb and is just fairly outrageous and always getting into adventures.
Do you think you'll ever come back to Cherry Bomb?
I really hope so. That book, there was sort of a series of unfortunate events, to crib from another person's title, that prevented it from getting published. But I would love for it to see the light of day sometime.
Yes, yeah. Aren't there are so many. There's at least for me though, where it's like it's not right, but it is in so many ways.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so what book character do you most relate to? Once again, can be one of your own, and there can be a top 3.
Well, okay, for that one, I am going to go with the main character from my current book because she is pretty much me. Only a little younger and more likely to actually investigate a murder instead of just saying, well, never mind, I'm not going to do this. But yes, I would say Claudia would be my number one character that I relate to, and
that is so cool. And I love when you can connect with the characters so much that you wrote too. Mm-hmm. Can you talk about like infusing elements of yourself into characters?
I mean, it's kind of just the easiest thing to do sometimes, because you think, well, what would I do in this situation? And, eliminate the not solve a mystery option. And then you just go forward from there.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that was all my questions for you today. I just have one more thing, and that is, what do you have coming up?
Marketplace book number 2. I'm working on it now, and should be coming out next year. So,
excellent.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah, everyone go read all of Daisy's current book, and then keep on the lookout for the next Marketplace novel. And thank you so much for coming on. I loved getting to talk to you.
Thank you so much. This was really great.
Awesome. Yeah. For Read Between the Lines, my name is Molly Southgate.
I'm Daisy Bateman.
Let's end this the way all great stories end. Happily ever after.
The end. Sorry.
Thank you for listening to Read Between the Lines, a book podcast. This episode is hosted by Molly Southgate. It is edited by Rob Southgate and produced by Southgate Media Group. You can get in touch with the show at readbetweenthelines@gmail.com, or you can send us a voicemail at 708-887-9473. That was 708-887-9473. You can also find us on Instagram at Read Between the Lines Podcast. Thank you so much for listening.